Welcome to episode 557 of the Brainy Business, Understanding the Psychology of Why People Buy. Today's episode are the most important books I read in 2025. Ready? Let's get started.
You are listening to the Brainy Business Podcast, where we dig into the psychology of why people buy and help you incorporate behavioral economics into your business, making it more brain-friendly. Now here's your host, Melina Palmer.
Hello, everyone. My name is Melina Palmer, and I want to welcome you to the Brainy Business Podcast. If you listen to the show a lot or have read any of my books or we're connected on social media or you've been to one of my talks or taken one of my classes, you know that I read a lot of books. It's one of the best things about doing this show, to be honest, that it gets me access to amazing and thoughtful people doing great work. And more often than not, when they have a book coming out. I have the privilege of reading a lot of books even before they come out, which is super cool. And as the show has gained popularity over the years, I've been able to connect with a more diverse group of authors and be exposed to books that may be directly applicable to behavioral science and behavioral economics, even if they aren't directly written by those in the field. And I love sharing them with you. In 2025, I featured 41 books on the Brainy Business Podcast that I read for the first time. Some of them came out earlier, and they're amazing. We had more than that if we count refreshes, but if we're looking at just brand new episodes on the show, 41 books. And I did read way more than that to cull down to these 41 fantastic books. And I decided to break these into categories to share my top most important that I read in each category during the year. I hope you're excited about all the books I talk about in today's episode. And while you're welcome to take notes, if that's your thing, I've also made it super easy for you with a supporting article showcasing all the great books of this year, as well as a link to our books page of the website, which is also searchable by category, which you're going to see some of these categories that I'm going to use in the list that's provided here today. And it's just a super awesome resource with books that I've been adding to for nearly 8 years now. The links for the website and so much more are included for you in the show notes for this episode. Those are waiting for you within the app you're listening to and at thebrainybusiness.com/557. As I've said already, I read a lot of books every year, and I love that I've heard from so many of you over the years that I've inspired you to read lots of books too. So many emails and messages on social media where people have either shared that they now have a long list of books they can't wait to read, sometimes pictures of a book stack they picked up after hearing authors on the show. It is so cool. So please keep those posts and emails and tags coming and let me know all about it, especially if you're inspired by a book you hear about in this episode. You'll find me as The Brainy Biz pretty much everywhere and as Melina Palmer on LinkedIn. And that place where I talked about sharing all the book list, the article is in my Brainy Bites newsletter, which is there on LinkedIn. So I've known for a while that this episode, which airs on Christmas Day, was a good opportunity to do a solo episode, as in not having a guest, because holidays can have an increase in downloads since people typically aren't working, but it's not guaranteed. So when there's a fluctuation like this and a release scheduled exactly on a holiday, I usually look to do a solo episode. Though that isn't the case with next week's episode with Claude Silver, because her book, Be Yourself at Work, is perfectly timed for the new year. It's such a fun way to kick off 2026. So definitely, if you're not already subscribed, do so you can check that one out. So anyway, I debated for a while about the best way to do this. Perhaps I would just do an episode about all the leadership books featured in 2025, or on all the books about sales or experience or productivity. Or maybe an episode where I do 1 minute about each book. I considered it 41 books in 41 minutes episode, which could be fun for a future episode. Let me know if you like that idea or have any other suggestions for future book breakdowns or episodes that you would like my take on. I really loved the idea of showcasing all the great themes of the year and not limiting it to just one. So ultimately, that led me to this idea, which showcases books from 7 different categories, which I'm going to break down for you as we go. Now, I love all these books, and they all impacted me throughout the year. Trust, it was hard, so hard to choose a top for these categories, excruciating in some cases. But I opted to use the filter of the book being important. So, what do I mean by important? That can mean it was important and impactful for me personally during the year, or it might be something I think is important for everyone to know and embrace, or important to the field or other areas of work. As we go, I'm going to break down the way I view the criteria as it applied to each of the books that I'm going to showcase today. And there is a top most important book and an honorable mention in each of the 7 categories. So we're going to have 14 books in total referenced here as we go. And no, as I said, there is an accompanying post in my LinkedIn newsletter, Brainy Bites, that showcases all the books of 2025 with some more thoughts about what stood out to me about each of those 41 books that were new to the show this year. There is a link in the show notes, of course. And if you find me, Melina Palmer, on LinkedIn, you should be able to easily subscribe. All right. With that, let's dive right in and talk about these top books that were the most important for me in 2025. The first of our 7 categories is called Foundations. These are books that are, as you might expect, covering foundational aspects of the field. You'll see this content in purple across our website, social media, and more. In case you've wondered what our colors are all about, because we've been using a lot of really bright, bold colors toward the end of 2024 and throughout 2025. And that's because they're done by theme. So while some of the books actually had concept names as their titles, like Framing and The Housefly Effect, 2 amazing books, by the way, that wasn't a requirement for inclusion in the category. I essentially used my discretion based on knowledge of either the author or the contents of the book to determine what was a fit here. I'm always happy to share my criteria and thoughts in detail. If you want to ask, please don't hesitate to reach out and ask me about that. So 5 of the 41 books fell in this category. And for me, the top most important book of 2025 was Lucky by Design, The Hidden Economics You Need to Get More of What You Want by Judd Kessler. I chose this book because I really love how practical Judd makes this often hidden area of decision making and gives really usable advice for how you can win more in life, even with simple stuff like the parking spot you get in the Costco parking lot, or when you're looking to book a reservation for a fancy restaurant on a busy Saturday night. This is really a new way to look at choice architecture. And he does a great job of showing both sides of the equation here, the person who's setting up the choice and those who are choosing, in growing levels of complexity that build throughout the book. It gives you a chance to see all the times you're maybe making a losing choice, potentially your default for whatever reason, not even realizing that there's a game being played right in front of you. And it shows how often you're presenting choices and creating these games of sorts to the world, both personally and professionally, with tips and tactics so you can understand what's the best game to play, how to structure the choices in the best way possible, and being thoughtful about those who are participating in the experience. I also appreciate that it doesn't feel super heavy or like it's blaming anyone or being a big manipulator. Sure, those people exist and it's useful to understand these hidden economies so you can win against them. But it also has this assumption that most of the people designing the architecture of the world actually want to help people make good decisions that serve them well and benefit the organization. But they just don't know that there are other options in the way they present the information. And it could actually be way easier to nudge people into making those best choices and feeling really good about it when decision design is taken into account. It's a great book with interesting personal stories that are relatable in a way that can help anyone win more in life and business by leveraging behavioral science and have a better understanding of how choice architecture works and why it matters, which I know is a concept a lot of people struggle with. And that is why I chose this as the top most important book of the year in the Foundations category. Congratulations, Judd Kessler, on your fantastic book, Lucky by Design. The honorable mention in the foundations category goes to The Winner's Curse, Behavioral Economics Anomalies Then and Now by Richard Thaler and Alex Emas. So I'm guessing it mostly goes without saying why this book gets the honorable mention in the category. Richard Thaler is a Nobel Prize winning laureate in the field of behavioral economics. And this book is a compilation of his original anomalies papers that really started it all. So many amazing findings that are being revisited all these years later and showing how the field and the individual anomalies have held out over the years, with some changes, of course. And then looking forward to what's on the horizon for the field. A clearly important book for anyone interested in behavioral economics and behavioral science. It was also personally important to me because it was my first time having Richard Thaler on the show and meeting him, and that was absolutely amazing and such an honor. Congratulations to Richard Thaler and Alex Emas on your amazing book, The Winner's Curse. And now I promise not to say this after every section, but as a reminder, there is a link to my Brainy Bites article shared in the show notes. So you can see the full list of books in this category from 2025. As I said, 5 books were here. These are just 2 of those. You can check out the episodes and my interviews with these amazing authors, maybe even buy a book or leave a kind comment if you're so inclined to support the author in that way. You can subscribe to my Brainy Bites newsletter on LinkedIn to get those regular articles from me. All right, moving on to our next category. And originally, this one was part of the foundation section because we consider it part of that grouping in our 5 key areas of focus we have at the Brainy Business when we do consulting work and for my talks and for guiding podcasts, content, and other content that I share out into the world. But for a few reasons, I decided that asking better questions deserved its own category for important books of the year. And that's why it's also purple. If you know me at all, you know I love questions. So this wasn't too hard of a decision to make. I mean, there were 2 books specifically about questions and understanding problems that I got to feature in 2025. How could I not honor them both? I love them both for various reasons and really debated about which one to give the top spot to and which would be the honorable mention. I quite possibly struggled with this the most of everything on this list, but in the end, I gave the top spot to Ask This Book a Question, an interactive journey to find wisdom for life's big and little decisions by Vicky Tan. Because I really love that it's loaded with fun illustrations by the author throughout the book that help it come to life. And it has a mix of stories and concepts from behavioral science and design thinking. And it really is a choose your own adventure sort of guide to finding your best and most important question to ask and ways to think about the answer for yourself. It has this really great quality of feeling like you're asking a trusted confidant, maybe a favorite aunt, for their advice and getting answers to your questions as you go throughout the book in a way that I've never really seen done before. Whether you're struggling with questions and decisions focused around life, health, relationships, work, quality time, or those big existential questions, this book has you covered. Vicky also included short chapters on nearly 40 specific concepts from design thinking and behavioral science that you can use to work on the questions you've asked. Many of them you've heard me talk about on this show, like functional fixedness, fundamental attribution error, hyperbolic discounting, and the anchoring effect. Others were new to the show, like the cathedral effect and the bizarreness effect. And I may do episodes on some of those later on. If there are any you want me to focus on in 2026 or beyond, please, of course, let me know. Now, you also may have noticed that I don't say she helps you answer or solve your problems and questions. While some decisions need to be made, like where to live or whether or not to take that job, and the book does help you do that. It isn't about never having other questions or finding the perfect answers. It's about understanding the value of questions and being thoughtful about them in your life so you can dedicate time to the right ones and work on solving them in your own way, not in a way that any book says is right, because that really doesn't exist. It's a great book that's a great tool for understanding your problems and getting unstuck. Congrats to Vicky Tan and Ask This Book a Question for being my top most important book about asking better questions in 2025. And as I said, in a very, 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 very close second, we have the honorable mention going to How to Fall in Love with Questions, A New Way to Thrive in Times of Uncertainty by Elizabeth Weingarten. I already love questions and want everyone else to love them too. So this book was a clear yes for the show, and to ensure it got a shout out on this list. The world is full of uncertainty, and this book really does help you understand what matters to you and ask better questions to help you move forward and thrive. It's a fantastic book. Huge shout out to Elizabeth Weingarten for helping us all fall in love with questions. Our next category is on productivity and goals, what we consider read content on the Brainy Business. And there were 6 books in this category in 2025. The winner in this category is You Only Die Once, How to Make It to the End with No Regrets by Jody Wellman. I was also able to have the fantastic Oliver Burkeman, author of 4,000 Weeks, on the show this year to discuss his book, Meditations for Mortals. And Jody's company is aptly called 4,000 Mondays for the same reason that given the averages, we humans only have 4,000 weeks or 4,000 Mondays here on Earth. So we should make the most of them. I didn't realize how impactful it was going to be that I really spent a lot of the end of 2024 reading these books. So yes, technically I read them in 2024 for the episode to come out in Q1. You get it, right? But it helped me have a new level of perspective on what it means to live our best lives so that whenever the end does come, while it still won't be welcome by any means, it isn't a life of woulda, coulda, shouldas. And the key reason that this was so important for me this year was because, while no one knew it then, at the time this episode came out, my own dad only had 4 more Mondays left before we lost him unexpectedly and far too early. And while I've reflected on his life after he was gone, I couldn't help but think that he really did live the best life in the 3,644 weeks or Mondays that he was here. And while I didn't really talk about it publicly for obvious reasons, as I can barely talk about it now, it's been a pretty hard year without him. I won't say too much more about it here because physically don't feel like I can. But what I can say is that this book meant a lot to me this past year. And I thought about it often, both in thinking about him and also in how I can move forward in this new version of the world in a way that will help me and my family to not have regrets when my time ultimately comes, hopefully a couple thousand Mondays away. So thank you, Jody Wellman, for your wonderful book, You Only Die Once. It meant more to me this year than I can say. Okay, so taking a fairly sharp turn to go on with the episode, the honorable mention in this category goes to Lean Learning, How to Achieve More by Learning Less by Pat Flynn. Pat is an absolutely awesome guy who is the host of Smart Passive Income with millions and millions of downloads. And he's written several amazing books and is crushing it on YouTube, mostly with his channels about Pokemon, which is a fascinating turn from his other work. We met while we were both speaking at Social Media Marketing World this year. Great conference. Shout out to Mike Stelzner and the whole team at Social Media Examiner. Definitely a must-attend event. So anyway, Pat was kind enough to indulge me in a conversation that started about Pokemon, and he made a quick video saying hello to my son Henry, which is so cool. And when I learned he had this book coming out and asked him to be on the show, It was awesome. And the book was such a great fit in its approach to help people not just learn everything they can, but taking a sort of essentialism style approach to learning and only learning what you need to at the right time. The idea of switching from just in case learning to just in time learning has become a popular theme here at the Brainy Business. So, in addition to getting to meet Pat and seeing what a genuinely kind human he is, so thoughtful and generous, this book was also important to me because I chose to make Pat's episode number 500 of the show. And while prepping for that episode, I was reflecting about the creation of the Brainy Business podcast and how so much of what I did to create this successful show. We do have over 1.6 million downloads in more than 170 countries now. Business that goes along with it actually followed a lot of the lean learning principles that Pat showcases in his book. I did a Brainy Bites article about that too, which was so fun to write. And the book and experience was so impactful on me this year. It definitely deserved a spot on this list of my most important books of 2025. So thank you to Pat Flynn for your amazing book, Lean Learning. We're moving on to the next section, which is leadership in general, our orange categories. But we have two of them here as well, because if I would have let leadership be its own category, there would have been 15 books in it, far too many to choose just one top book. So I opted to split it into two groups. While they definitely all touch on multiple aspects of leadership, I decided to have a category for leadership that applies most to working on yourself, and a second category that's focused on the others around you who you may inspire or lead for. So first, let's start with you, that self-leadership category, which ended up with 7 books in it. The book I felt was most important this year was The Power Trap: How Leadership Changes People and What to Do About It by Nick Kinley. I chose this book because it talks in depth about something I've never really seen covered before, which is what happens to people when they get power. And it may surprise you to know that the research shows our brains actually change physically when we get power, and it does so in very predictable ways. And unfortunately, many of the things that make someone a good candidate for leadership are the same things that when they get out of balance can make them a terrible leader who is changed by power in negative ways that can really harm others and businesses. The book helps to show how we all change in the face of power, but that it doesn't have to be terrible. And he gives tips for people hiring leaders so they can have a leadership team that's more likely to succeed and not become toxic. Hint, if the candidate is a bit too much of anything on the list of traits he shares in the book, don't assume that they're going to even out and adapt to be less of that thing. It will most definitely get worse and more pronounced as they get more power. One of the things I really appreciated about this book is that he starts by sharing how power in and of itself isn't bad, and personally attacking the notion that power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. That isn't necessarily true, and it doesn't have to be true. In fact, he shows how in groups where, say, charity or collaboration are seen as desirable, these power traits and the brain changes can actually help people to be more charitable and collaborative, which is so wonderful to see. We can actually build companies and societies that celebrate good traits and let the human brain's natural responses to power work for positive benefits instead of negative repercussions. Yes, please. If you'd like more of that, let's read this book. Everyone, buy this book for somebody. It's a wonderful book I think everyone needs right now, especially when it may feel like a power-hungry few are running amok these days in negative ways. So check out The Power Trap by Nick Kinley to learn more. And also check out the honorable mention book as you go on that quest. It is Defy: How to Speak Up When It Matters by Sunita Saw. In a world where we feel compelled to say yes, even when we don't want to, and our brains are wired to herd and go with the flow, sometimes you need to defy. It might be your own brain's tendencies. It might be someone else asking for your time, or worse. But knowing that it's okay, good, and important to defy sometimes and get steps on how to do it, so important, and a wonderful book. Thank you, Sunita Saw, for Defy. The honorable mention in this category. And now on to the leadership books that focus on supporting others, whether that's by being a great mentor or building better connections or having a great team dynamic. This category of books focused on being a leader that others want to follow and using your influence for good. The top most important book for me in this category is The Doors You Can Open, a new way to network, build trust, and use your influence to create a more inclusive workplace by Rosalind Chow. Reciprocity is one of my favorite concepts in behavioral science. So anything that's about giving to others, whether it's through mentorship or just in thoughtful generosity, I'm all over it. And this book definitely checked some important boxes for me. One of the key things that stood out to me in this was the specification of difference between mentorship and sponsorship. And in the book, Rosalind is really advocating for the latter. To be a mentor to someone is important, and she shares that people can do both and everyone needs both mentors and sponsors. But being a mentor can be very time consuming. There's a different level of investment. Sponsoring someone is different. It might be recommending someone for a promotion or sharing about their books in a podcast episode, wink, wink. You can be a sponsor by just saying, hey, do you know so-and-so? She's great at that. Maybe you make the connection. Maybe you just mention them, but that can go so far in helping someone to get a leg up in the world. As the book's title implies, you're opening a door for them and lending the status you have to their name. This book also goes into the difference between status and power and why both matter. Great insights there. So, when it's so easy to open doors for others and knowing that generosity will absolutely come back to you in great ways as well. Research shows that when you sponsor others, your own social status increases, which is a win-win. It meant to me that this had to be my top most important book in this category this year. You can start opening doors by tagging one of your favorite authors in the post for this episode or the list I share on LinkedIn, or sharing this episode or the posts with others who would benefit from learning about these totally wonderful authors who were kind enough to join me on the Brainy Business this year. And thanks in advance on behalf of all of us and everyone that you can go on to sponsor in whatever way you feel compelled to do so today, tomorrow, and into the future. A little bit really does go a long way. And congrats, of course, again to Rosalind Chow for her amazing book, The Doors You Can Open. Now, the honorable mention in this category of leading others goes to Inspire, the Universal Path for Leading Yourself and Others by Adam Galinsky. Yes, I know the subtitle also mentions leading yourself, but the aspects about inspiring others stood out to me in particular, which is why I put it in this category. One of the main things that really stuck with me this year was the leadership amplification effect and how when you become a leader, everything you do is magnified. Praise is felt so much more. So give that praise and sponsorship and kind words, even just like remembering people's names as generously as you can as you move up the ladder. It means so much. But of course, that means the negatives are felt that much more too. He gives an example of where he was exhausted as a new dad, and while he was on a dissertation committee, he looked very disinterested, maybe even yawned while a student was talking, and they shared later how it totally threw them off and was so impactful. He didn't mean anything by it, but as a leader, it had a huge impact on that person. Keeping that in mind as you lead others is so important, which is why Inspire by Adam Galinsky made the honorable mention on this list. We're down to our last two categories now. This one is experience, our blue category, and specifically in creating great customer experiences for brands. While that does have an aspect of being a great strategic leader, books that are focused on giving customers what they want, even if they can't tell you, see what I did there, is what earned books a spot in this category. There were 6 of them out of the 41 books featured on the show this year. And the one I selected to be the top spot is Press Play, Why Every Company Needs a Gaming Strategy by Bastian Bergman. I chose this book because it's so different from anything else I heard this year, and so its lessons really stuck with me. It's so easy to feel like games are just for gamers, or that there are certain brands that can use games, but most serious brands don't have a place for them. And that's just not true. This book has examples from all sorts of companies, from Peloton to New York Times and Chipotle and Burberry, and so many others. 3 billion people play games every day. Just think about that for a second. 3 billion? We humans are wired for games. And as Bastian shares, companies who think like game designers in all areas of their business are more apt to win, since games are engaging and aligned with human behavior. Game designers don't just hope people will show up and stick around. They study motivation, design for curiosity, and create experiences that people actually want to return to. They understand what makes us feel immersed, challenged, and rewarded. And they achieve a level of connection most organizations can only dream about. But if you thoughtfully include gaming in your strategy, you can enjoy some of this too. And don't worry, this is way more than that buzzword of gamification. And Bastian shows several levels of investment that any company can review to find the best one for them and their goals. You don't have to create a brand new app and interface from scratch to see the benefits. There are tons of options and great case studies to inspire you in Press Play by Bastian Bergman. And the honorable mention in this category goes to The Like Button by Bob Goodson. I chose this book because it shows the fascinating story of how the like button was created. Yes, he was one of the people credited with it, and how it has changed the way businesses advertise and how people interact, and the creation of influencers and social currency. It's a fascinating journey and definitely important for everyone to consider in the years to come as you think about your own content and business value. All right, now we've got just 7 of our 41 books left and have made it to the final category. So far, I've shared what I feel are the most important books I read this year in the categories of foundations, asking better questions, productivity and goals, leadership of yourself, leadership over others, experience, and that just leaves pricing and sales, which is our green category. So the top most important pricing and sales book of the year is I Need That: Creating and Marketing Products People Are Compelled to Buy by Laurier Mandan. This book stood out to me for a lot of reasons, and one of them is actually the use of the word need versus want. I went through a lot of debate in my book, What Your Customer Wants and Can't Tell You, about whether or not to say need or want. And conversely, it isn't by accident that my second book is What Your Employees Need and Can't Tell You. Those weren't arbitrary decisions, and I was confident that Laurier must have had similar thoughts in the title of his own book, and I couldn't wait to talk to him about it, and it was fun to learn his perspective in our episode. There were a ton of great nuggets from this book. We definitely got along well and are on the same wavelength in so many things. And one that really resonated with me was that to create a new gangbusters product that people need, you have to make something that's not just a little better than what they have now, but it needs to be 10 times better than the existing solution. He shows the math behind it and explains that essentially a creator will overestimate how good something is by at least 3 times. A purchaser will overvalue what they have or the cost of switching by another 3 times. So you have to balance that out and other factors to be 10 times over the status quo. When you put that level of requirement on yourself before a launch, it's clear a lot of good or useful ideas aren't going to make it through to the I need that stage. And instead of wasting your time investing in one that isn't going to cut it, you can read this book to help you create products that essentially sell themselves. For that reason, and so many others, I Need That by Laurier Mandan is the most important book of the year to me in the sales category. And the final honorable mention of the year goes to Epic Disruptions: 11 Innovations That Shaped Our Modern World by Scott Anthony. I chose this book because of the way Scott takes us on a journey of some really surprising innovations and innovators to showcase how they impacted the world and what brands and people can learn from them. From Florence Nightingale to Pampers, gunpowder to the printing press, there are some amazing stories here that are useful to learn about. And Scott worked directly with Clayton Christensen, author of The Innovator's Dilemma, and co-authored some other books with him over the years. So that seminal work is really woven into the fabric of this book and its stories. It was a fun read with practical advice. I learned a ton about history along the way, which I love, and that's why it became the honorable mention in that category. All right, we did it. As a quick recap, the full list of my top most important books and honorable mentions from 2025 are Lucky by Design by Judd Kessler, The Winner's Curse by Richard Thaler and Alex Emas, Ask This Book a Question by Vicky Tan, How to Fall in Love with Questions by Elizabeth Weingarten, You Only Die Once by Jody Wellman, Lean Learning by Pat Flynn, The Power Trap by Nick Kinley, Defy by Sunita Saw, The Doors You Can Open by Rosalind Chow, Inspire by Adam Galinsky, Press Play by Bastian Bergman, The Like Button by Bob Goodson, I Need That by Laurier Mandan, and Epic Disruptions by Scott Anthony. And as you heard throughout the show, we did a ton of work last year so we could dedicate 2025 as the first year where we really intentionally separated and showcased content in 5 key categories, which were highlighted in these 7 categories here today. We have those represented by color to help it be visually intuitive as you're searching for content. Say you want to find episodes or books that are about leadership and change management, orange is your category. Pricing and sales, it's green. We added search functionality for all the 550 plus episodes of the show, and also for all the books that have been featured over the years by category and search term. If you haven't yet, please do go to thebrainybusiness.com/podcast or thebrainybusiness.com/books to try it out for yourself. You will, of course, see the books and episodes featured on today's episode and find lots of other inspiration to add to your to read or to listen to queue as you learn more about behavioral economics and how it can apply to your life and business. Whether you want to be more productive or work on your mindset, red, get more employees to buy in, orange, customers to have delightful experiences with you, blue, so that they buy, green, or if you just want some foundational knowledge about the field, purple. It's all waiting for you at thebrainybusiness.com. And of course, you need to check out my article in Brainy Bites that shows all these books and the other 27 that were new on the show this year. Support an author. Check one out. Give them a shout out if you've read it. And of course, if you have a book I should look at featuring on the show this year, let me know about it. I always love interacting with listeners and hearing what resonated with you. So please come share it all with me on social media. You'll find me as the Brainy Biz pretty much everywhere and as Melina Palmer on LinkedIn, which is, of course, where that Brainy Bites newsletter is waiting. You'll find links to make it easy for you in the show notes for the episode, which are found within the app you're listening to and at thebrainybusiness.com/557. Thank you again for another fabulous year of the Brainy Business. I can't wait to see you in 2026. Join me next time and celebrate the new year with Gary V's Chief Heart Officer, Claude Silver, to discuss her book, Be Yourself at Work. It's going to be a lot of fun. You don't want to miss it. Until then, thanks again for listening and learning with me. And remember to be thoughtful.
Thank you for listening to the Brainy Business Podcast. Melina offers virtual strategy sessions, workshops, and other services to help businesses be more brain-friendly. For more free resources, visit thebrainybusiness.com.